Superheroes are incredibly fascinating. I mean, who wouldn't want to have superpowers or be able to fight crime while wearing a cool costume and also get all the ladies? But even though they're fictional, that doesn't stop us from learning from them and applying those lessons into our own lives. So here are some tips on how to become a superhero in real life. Tip No. 1. Be born with it. This one goes out to everyone who's frustrated that they can't have powers like the X-Men, and it's just not fair. The truth is, if you were born with powers, you'd probably be a superhero already. See, most superheroes get their powers through random chance or genetics, which means there's no real way for normal people like you and me to become mutants. Although to be fair, Professor X did offer Scott Summers a spot at the school after he found out that Scott could shoot optic blasts from his eyes. However, I don't think Professor X was expecting Scott to say, "Nah, I'm good." But hey, Scott was probably thinking that he could make it on his own as a solo mutant superhero, just not really sure how well that would work out for him. The bottom line is, unless you're born with powers, you should start working on becoming a hero without them, but we'll talk about that later. Tip number 2. Radiation. Another way that many superheroes got their abilities is through exposure to radiation, like the Fantastic Four when they were bombarded by cosmic rays, or Spider-Man when he was bitten by a radioactive spider. But even though these characters gained incredible powers, this method comes with a big caveat: you will probably die, so unless you're okay with that, then maybe stay away from radioactive things. Now, if you're still set on gaining powers this way, I do have some alternative suggestions. First, you could try to recreate the conditions that gave these heroes their powers. For instance, Reed Richards created an artificial cosmic ray generator in order to test its effects. Second, you could try to replicate the effects of radiation without the whole lethal side effect. For example, Spider-Man's radioactive spider bite gave him proportionate abilities. So you could try to find a spider that has a mutation causing enzyme and then see what happens when you're bitten by that. Or if you really want to go all in, you could try creating a synthetic version of the spider's bite. However, I don't suggest trying to recreate any of these experiments at home. You'll probably need more than a beaker and a Bunsen burner. Tip 3. Make a wish. Sometimes superheroes get their powers by making a wish, like when Reed Richards wished for the ability to stretch his body so that he could save people from great heights, or when Namor made a deal with the demon Dasan so that he could rule over Atlantis. Well, Namor may have regretted that decision a few times throughout his life, but deals with demons aside, making a wish is probably the easiest way to get superpowers. The only problem is actually finding a being that will grant your wish. In Marvel Comics, there's been many different beings that have granted wishes. There's the Fairy Godmother, Morgan Le Fay, the Red Skull, Dasane Odin, Yethana, Mr. Mexispake, and probably a bunch of others that I've forgotten about. Oh, and let's not forget about those magical MacGuffins known as the Infinity Stones. If you can locate all 6 stones, you basically have all the power in the universe at your fingertips. However, good luck trying to track down these magical rocks because they're super hard to find and very coveted by many different people, both good and evil. But if you can find them, then you won't have to wish for powers because you can literally wish for anything, even things like bringing back loved ones from the dead, ending world hunger and global warming, and becoming the ruler of everything. But if you aren't careful and think about it, then your wishes could cause more harm than good. Like, remember when Reed Richards wished for the ability to stretch his body? That led to him getting the Fantastic Four, which is great, except for the fact that he unleashed the being known as Galactus upon the world. Tip No. 4. Magical enchantments. Another way that some superheroes acquire their powers is through magical enchantments. For example, Scarlet Witch's powers were amplified by the Darkhold, which is also where she learned how to use her abilities. And if you're wondering where she got her powers in the first place, well, that's complicated. But the long story short is that she is a mutant whose abilities are tied into the very fabric of reality itself. Anyway, magical enchantments like the Darkhold aren't easy to come by, but there are other examples of enchantments that have given non-mutants powers. For example, the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, received the Eye of Agamotto, which allowed him to manipulate time. Of course, Doctor Strange didn't become a superhero because of that one item, but it definitely helped him on his adventures. Either way, there are a lot of different types of magic users in the Marvel Universe that have access to items like this. So I would say that the best way to get something like this is to either be related to magic yourself or learn as much as you can about it. so that you can impress someone powerful enough to hand it over to you. Tip 5. Get bitten. So far, I've talked about 5 different ways that people have gained powers in Marvel Comics, and they're all pretty unique. But there is one thing that all of these methods have in common. They're all pretty dangerous. Becoming a superhero through these methods takes a lot of risk, whether it's dealing with demons, getting irradiated or bitten by a radioactive animal. It's not exactly safe, but there is another way for ordinary people to gain powers. It's just, well, it's not really a method. It's more like a job. You see, in the Marvel Universe, there's a lot of jobs that come with their own unique perks. For example, being a superhero often comes with the territory of receiving high-tech suits, cool gadgets, and sometimes powers. Let me explain. When Peter Parker became Spider-Man, he inherited the assets of the previous Spider, which included his costume, web shooters, and his uncle's research notes on how to make artificial webbing. On top of that, Tony Stark created Iron Man so that he could avoid going to jail for illegally selling weapons. And Bruce Wayne became Batman so that he could solve his daddy issues. So technically, you could argue that these guys became heroes in order to receive the benefits that came along with it. I guess if you really want to become a superhero, you could just apply for the job. After all, if you were bitten by a radioactive spider, you might as well take advantage of it. Tip 6. Join a superhero team. Now, this tip isn't going to magically give you powers, but it will increase your chances of getting them. See, joining a superhero team gives you the opportunity to rub elbows with some very powerful people, which means you'll be close enough to catch whatever power-giving substance they're slinging around. It's basically like working for the Avengers, except instead of going on missions with Earth's mightiest heroes, you'll be assisting the second stringers. Also, this gives you the opportunity to prove yourself. If you're really lucky, maybe one of the higher-ups will be so impressed by your performance that they'll consider you worthy of becoming a full member. Not to mention that joining a superhero team gets you access to their resources and training. So even if you don't end up getting powers, you'll still be better off because of it. However, one thing you should watch out for when joining any organization is that they may have their own agenda, and that agenda may not always align with yours. So if you join a team, make sure you know what you're getting yourself into. Otherwise, you might end up like Hawkeye after he joined the West Coast Avengers. His powers weren't taken away, but it was pretty embarrassing when he had to reveal himself as a Skrull undercover agent in front of the entire team. Tip 7. The scientific method. Out of all the tips I've mentioned so far, this one is probably the safest. Even though science has yet to unlock the secrets of superpowers, it has done amazing things that have improved the quality of life for billions of people. The scientific method relies on reason and logic rather than random chance, meaning that you'll be more in control of what you're getting yourself into. Unlike wishing on random fairy godmothers or making deals with demons, science also allows for improvement and adaptation. Unlike magical users, science doesn't really have a set canon of spells that you memorize. Instead, you learn and adapt as you go. This means that if you fail one experiment, you can use that knowledge to improve the next one. And unlike mutants whose powers are locked in from the moment they're born, science allows you to keep improving your powers. Sure, mutants can train to get better at using their abilities, but there's a limit to how far they can push it. Once you've maxed out your potential, that's it. You're as strong as you're gonna get. But with science, you can keep pushing the limits further and further. Although it is worth mentioning that the scientific method hasn't produced any superheroes yet. It's only created super-enhanced humans like the super soldier serum that gave Captain America his abilities, or the extremis virus that enhanced Iron Man's durability and allowed him to control his blood flow. But hey, it's still a viable option. So which tip will you use? Now that you've learned about all these different ways that people have obtained powers in the Marvel Universe, which tip are you going to use? Or maybe you're going to ignore all of these tips and come up with your own method. Let me know in the comments section below. But before you go, make sure to check out this playlist of videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, and don't forget to subscribe.